Okay, so I'm Andy. I obviously have a bit of an accent. I moved to the US in 2007, got married, and started trying to make a career in the US. Prior to coming here, I'd studied agricultural business in Australia. I had worked in the financial sector for a couple of different companies, including National Australia Bank, Canon Australia, one of our big telcos called Optus, and a couple other little jobs here and there. But other than that, I came to the US, changed careers a little bit, and got into recruiting. And since then, I've worked for Kelly Financial, which is a recruitment agency. I then went to Adidas America, which is just up the street here, and then am now at Craft Brew Alliance. I've been there for 2 years. My role there is to manage the whole recruiting function for Craft Brew. So there's 4 different brands. We've got Whitman Brothers that you're probably fairly familiar with. We've got Red Hook up out of Seattle and Portsmouth, New Hampshire. We've got Kona Brewing out of Hawaii. And then Omission, which is the gluten-free beer that you've probably seen on the shelves more recently. And there will be more things added to that as the years go by, I'm sure. It's an 800-person company. A good chunk of that is in our 5 restaurants that we have. But then there's another good half of that that's corporate and production. Last year we hired 188 people, and about 120 of those were full-time people that would have had some sort of discussion around salaries when they started. It is a team of 1, just me doing that. So a lot of that's done over the phone, negotiating with people who, particularly on the sales side, is probably where things get most interesting, and then up around the VP and exec level, which at some point you guys will reach. Obviously, careers are a bit of a pyramid, so the majority of our jobs are around the junior and mid-level, and we can talk about questions around those later. Outside of work, I've put it in the bio there, I'm a bit of a rugby guy. I'm Vice President of the Union in the Northwest here for Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. And so I've also been coach for 3 years at the Portland Rugby Club until recently, where I've changed roles. And there's a lot of conversations with players, and it's a different type of conversation you have with people that experience in sports negotiating as well. That's me.
Good evening, my name is Michelle Schwartz. I coordinate Cambia's internship program and college relations. My prior career up to just over a year ago was all in college admissions. So I come from higher education. I love working with students and what happens at the intersection of public-private partnerships. So bringing students into the organization, watching you build your skill set, but also watching what your energy can do to our efforts. CambiaHealth Solutions is the parent organization of Regions, licensed Blue Cross Blue Shield provider in Oregon and Utah, and a licensed Blue Shield provider in Washington and Idaho. We provide health insurance for more than 2.2 million members in our 4-state region and employ more than 6,000 individuals. One of the things that makes us a little bit different is we're actually a not-for-profit organization, so we are cause-driven. We are looking for innovative, big thinkers who can help us transform healthcare in this country. In addition to Regions, which is our largest business, we have between 8 and 9 startup organizations, all health and wellness focused. We really want to provide affordable access to healthcare and better information and tools so you all can become better educated consumers in healthcare. So we're really utilizing technology to leverage transparency so that people begin to understand the true costs of healthcare. My role is to coordinate our internship program. We tend to hire about 40 full-time paid interns in the summer and about 15 interns during the academic year. I also fill our entry-level positions when they become available. Most of our full-time roles, we're looking for at least 3 to 5 years of experience. I work on the talent acquisition team, and my colleagues and I assist our hiring managers across the organization in identifying talent and coordinating interviews and selecting candidates and making position offers. So when you really begin thinking about what it is that's going to make you competitive, to ask for a specific salary, that process starts and your alignment with an organization. So prior to ever going to apply for a job, you really should be reflecting on what are your values, what's important to you. Is it important what an organization does? Do you care more about work-life balance? Do you care about location? All of these are things that are going to affect ultimately what you can negotiate. For example, our company, 19% of our workforce works completely remote. So that may not be something that's interesting to you now, but if you ever want to have a family, having that flexibility or a flexible work schedule, those are the types of things that even as entry-level employees, there can be some level of negotiation around.
Okay. So, would each of you just take a quick minute and describe some things that you think, sort of as a primer, people who are getting ready to think about that first job offer that they should think about based on your experience in the different negotiations, and then we'll open it up for some questions to sort of follow up and dig a little deeper.
I think obviously your first step really needs to be finding out what your market value is, what goes with your degree, what goes with the experience you may have been able to add previously for either internships or work you had been able to do before you started your degree. I'm not sure what, that's always an individual story, but you need to be able to find out roughly where you should be sitting at. So some interesting things, we're in Portland here, and Portland's kind of in the middle of cost of living in the US. You've got very expensive cities like New York and LA. You've got a much cheaper cost of living down in the southeast. Looking at the company that you're applying to and when you're about to have this salary negotiation, thinking about where that company is headquartered is going to be a big part of that discussion. At Craft Brew Alliance, we're headquartered here in Portland, so our salary ranges and our grades are all based on the fact that you probably are going to be living in the Northwest. But we have cost of living adjustments for people that we have in New York, in Chicago, and so you need to be aware of where you might sit in that with the company that you're discussing with. If you are talking with a Big Four accounting firm, chances are that their base entry-level salaries are going to be higher than a similar company that is based out of Portland, right? Because they're working on numbers from headquarters somewhere else. In certain situations, that works to someone's benefit. If we hire someone down in the southeast and their cost of living is really cheap, then they're making out and they're doing really well. In other cities where it's not as expensive to get considered for the cost of living adjustment, then they're going to lose a little bit, and we try and make that part of our discussions when we're in there. So there are lots of fringe areas that we can go into discussing. I've got a ton written down here that I wanted to cover. Before I get into that. So I really think, if you get that basic understanding of what your entry-level range is going to be, that's going to help you be more confident when you have this discussion around salary with someone, whether it be a recruiter or the hiring manager. Your biggest hurdle right now going into doing this for the first time is your comfort level having that discussion. If you leave it till the very end, to when they're actually going to give you an offer on paper, you're kind of leaving it too late. You want to set an expectation with them earlier on, or find out from them earlier on what they're looking for. Probably not the first interview, maybe after the second interview, something like that. You want to read the situation well, but that comfort level with that discussion is what you need to have. If you want to practice with a friend beforehand, I would do that. Talk to your other friends that are getting offers, find it, some people aren't comfortable sharing what they're earning, but if you do have friends that are comfortable telling you, how their negotiations went, what they're getting, talk to them about how they phrase the questions, how did they respond to the questions. It's going to help you be more comfortable at that time.
I agree with Andy that really the first step again is about reflecting on what your market value is. That process should start even before you draft your resume. Your resume should contain as much quantitative or qualitative value that you've added to an organization, whether that be a student organization through an internship. What did you do? Did you oversee a program? How many people were you in charge of? How much money did you oversee if you were a treasurer for an organization? Numbers, numbers, numbers. What you're trying to do is create value so that any recruiter or hiring manager understands what value you might add to the organization. So that starts before you ever engage with it in a conversation with someone in the organization. Second step is the interview. Make sure that you understand whether the position, if you're contacted for an interview, is there going to only be one, or is it a two-step interview? If it's a two-step, is the first person going to be someone in a role similar to mine in human resources, and the second interview going to be with the hiring manager? If so, you can ask some questions in your initial interview about the pay range for that position. Most individuals are willing to share what that scale is going to be. You also want to be doing research on what are the expectations for this region, as Andy mentioned. You can use online resources, but make sure you're using ones that are valid. There's some out there that are just based on, creating surveys of graduating students who tend to inflate what they're actually going to be making. And then when you meet with the hiring manager, learn a little bit about what they're asking. You should always have a list of questions that you ask of the person that you might be reporting to. What are your expectations? What is the ideal candidate? What is the review process? How do, if I were to be offered a position, do you review candidates annually or quarterly? What is sort of what you're going to be looking for if I'm eligible for a raise? And what you're building in is your backup plan. If you don't get the salary that you initially wanted, make sure that you understand when might be your next opportunity for an increase in salary. And that'll give you some idea when you talk to the person who makes the offer to you, what you have to base a request for an increase in salary on. My experience doing X, Y, and Z really identified or matched up nicely with what the hiring manager said they were looking for in an ideal candidate. When you request it in addition to a salary, it's not just because you want to make more money. All of us want to make more money. That's not a reasonable request. But I do think that even if it's your first job offer and you are nervous, all the more reason to ask for something. It shows, one, that you value yourself, but you're never going to get comfortable with it until you do it. And it's one of my regrets in my first position. I was so excited. I loved the organization. It was a great match. I just wanted to show up on my first day. And I think the best salary raise you're ever going to get with any organization is your first one. And if you don't get it with your first organization, then you need to be prepared to ask for it when you switch jobs. So be sure you get some practice doing that. Because it actually tends to affect women far more than men in terms of our nervousness about asking for more money. So if you practice, nothing bad can come of it, as long as you're respectful.
Okay, so let's go ahead and let's just start asking some questions, and then we'll see where it goes, and then fill in as you see, things go. So, who has a question, or who wants to be the first to ask a question?
Yeah.
So if you already have a contract signed, but you're looking for help with moving to a new place or something, or just starting your career in a certain city, how do you go about asking for that, moving expenses?
So you're talking about relocation expenses? Yep. So relocation expenses, this is one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. There's more than just your base pay. There are all these other things like bonuses. There are several different kinds of bonuses. There's endless amounts of ways a company can structure a bonus. And maybe there'll be a second question later on bonuses. Relocation versus a bonus is initially a better deal because there are certain parts of relocation that aren't taxed. When you get up to director level and things, that there are things that do fall into a taxable category, but the chances are at the level of roles you're in now, you're probably looking at somewhere, a minimum $1,500 reload up to $8,000, depending, you might be going all the way to New York, who knows. So those kind of things, most companies will be very willing to be flexible on, in my experience, and so you just need to be able to bring that up. Now, you should know in advance that that job's not going to be in your city and everything else. So that's something that you can be confident in bringing up, and just saying, hey, I'm going to have to move. You can tell them a little bit about your situation with that move, what kind of expectation you have for it to cost you. But when they give you that first offer, so let's say they give you a base salary and say, we're going to give you $1,500 for relay. You've looked at the price of gas just to drive across there, and it's probably going to be $2,000. You've got to go back to them with some sort of fixed number. We talked about numbers before already. You know, with the why you need more. You can't just be like, oh, I was hoping for more like 3. You know, you've got to go back and say, hey, I've looked at the price of gas. I've looked at shipping my car. I can't do it either way for less than this. You know, can you help me out? And I think most companies at that point would be fairly understanding on relocation.
For us, as Andy mentioned, there are all sorts of different structures of bonuses. We are not likely to pay relocation for entry-level positions, but we might pay a lump sum starting bonus. And that would actually be tied, you'd be signing a contract, and it would be linked to your employment with the organization for a set period of time. So we will give you this money, but we have the expectation that you work for us for X, Y, and Z time. Otherwise, you'll be expected to pay that back to the organization.
And read the fine print on that, because at my work it's a prorated amount. So if you're there for 1.5 years, you only have to pay 1/4 of it back. If you're there for a year, you pay half of it back. But a lot of other companies are sneaky, and they'll say you have to pay the full amount back if you leave within 2 years or whatever. So read the detail.
And that time frame changes too. So for us, if we were, the larger the amount, the larger the expectation.
Going with that relocation, is it reasonable to ask a company to help you look for a place to live, or like to help maybe coordinate that, or
Yeah.
it's like, say for instance, we're going all the way to New York City, right?
Depends on the organization, and you know, I think it's always fair to ask lots of questions. You know, I'm moving, or do you work with a third-party company? But for us, generally, that would also be linked to the level of position. The higher executive positions, there's a lot more perks at that level.
Yeah, we'll often provide what we call a look-see trip. When I was at Adidas as well, same thing, they would provide a look-see trip, so they would pay for your flights to come out. You'd get a night or two in a hotel, and you could rent a car and drive around town and have a look. So usually that's all factored in with the relocation costs, so that's another thing you want to look at if you do have to move as well as come and see and find a place to stay. They will very regularly have a limited amount of time. They will allow you to stay in a hotel or extended stay apartment. It can be quite negotiable within the relocation offer itself. So some companies have a very detailed list of what you can and can't do in the relocation amount. You can come back to them and say, hey, I've got 2 cars. You know, my wife and I, we've got 2 cars or whatever. The relocation contract says you'll only pay for gas for 1. If I can get in under the total amount of this contract, would you allow me to reimburse the gas on the second car? And you know, as long as you're within the amount, they can be flexible on that. The look-see trip, I would always ask for it. You should not be accepting a job in a city you've never been to. You don't know where you're going to end up. We had a candidate of ours who thought she knew where she was going. She ended up in Boston. And then when she got there, she realised she wasn't going to be paid enough to live in the part of town that she wanted to live in. And so she ended up living in a part of town we really didn't want her living in. And it was all because she just didn't think about it beforehand. And so we caught back up with that, salary reviews and everything else. We all wanted to be in a safer part of town, so we were reasonable with it. But again, having that expectation, I know where I'm going, is very important.
And again, I think it links back to doing your research. When we post positions, we usually post where they are, or in your first interview, you should be asking about the location of that, so that you can even be doing your research prior. You know, you should have your research, a lot of your research in place, so that when they make that offer, you have some ideas around these things. Because when they make their initial offer, there's a lot more opportunity for negotiation than each step of the way. Oh, I didn't think of this, I'm coming back for more. Oh, I didn't think of this, coming back for more. Because you need to be thinking about it holistically, because that says something about the kind of employee you're going to be. And if I ask 5 times for more money, even if I would have asked for the same thing in one conversation, you're not as likely to get it.
Things will move very quickly once you get that first offer too. If you haven't done any research by then, you're in trouble. Yep.
Is it the same idea for relocation when it goes from like a promotion? I was trying to like negotiate it, or is it slightly different when looking at promotion with relocation?
Yeah, I think you actually have more room for negotiation on relocation when you're an internal. I haven't come across a company that's going to shortchange an internal on the move. Now, obviously you're a craft brewer, right? So quite often we've got, salespeople are moving across the country all the time. There's no promotion there that doesn't require a move. So we're doing our best to make sure that no one's going out of pocket when they're moving across the country for one of our roles internally.
I think just to help start ballpark it, what's the sort of starting salary range that you have seen in your respective companies here in the Portland area?
For a particular
For
type of
entry level
accounting, supply chain,
finance?
Yeah. I can answer that. I'll take it from the private industry point of view. This is where who you're getting the job offer really matters. If you're getting a job as an accounting admin with a retail organisation, it could be someone like, who's a good local retailer, Fry's Electronics, right? Someone like that. Versus someone who's in the private financial banking sector or something else. These types of industries make a huge difference because they have different profit margins. There's non-profits, like I said, they've got different salary grades and everything for the same type of job. And so that makes a big difference. So you might accept the job for lower salary if they've got the right mission and the story and everything else that you want to be part of. You want to go work for Chevron and put oil in the ocean, they'll pay you tons of money to do it. So you need to be aware of who you're going to be working for, because that'll be different. An entry level, let's say financial admin type role, it should be anywhere between 40 to 55. If you've got an MBA, you'd be up around the 55. If you're straight out, regular business degree, you're probably looking at 40 for your very first job. But again, I'd stress that there could be some changes depending on who that company is.
And for clarification, there's a huge distinction between nonprofit and not-for-profit. We run like a corporation. We care about the bottom line. We just don't line the pockets of shareholders. We reinvest our money for our members. But when you look at our pay, it's very competitive. But where you may see a differential, for accounting is a great example. If you're working for a public firm, they may offer you more, but you may be working 80-hour weeks. We pay our accountants very competitively, but they have a tremendous work-life balance. And that's where I say what your values, and Andy certainly referenced that too, is really important. If you want a job where you're working a 40-hour week as an entry-level employee, you may be willing to take less money. You may not have to. I found, we pay our our undergraduate interns between $16 and $20 an hour, so we do pay competitively. But our value is really around work-life balance. So that's a piece of the puzzle too.
Yep.
How do you talk about kind of holistic benefits, like your membership, your health savings account? Is there ways to negotiate that so you can see if you take healthcare, not just dollar-wise?
In our organization, when we make an offer, we're a health insurance company, so there are great benefits when it comes to that. But you bring up a really interesting thing around health savings account. That's one of our health options. But usually you get a package of benefits. And so when you're presented with an offer, you have an offer letter which explains what the salary range or salary will be for that position. And then you have a bunch of other information about your benefits. Usually benefits, like your health insurance, aren't necessarily negotiable, but you want to ask other interesting questions. So one of the things that our organization will do is automatically match your retirement up to 6%. So whatever you invest in it, the company will match up to 6%. If we meet certain company goals, there's the opportunity to have a 5% bonus on that at the end of the year. We also, as an organization, if we meet other certain goals, we're eligible for incentives, and that's a percentage of your earned salary for the year. So you have to understand the complexity of the offer, so that when you are comparing two different offers, you're comparing apples to apples instead of straight salary with fewer health benefits or less time off, things like that. We actually have a health facility on our campus. Interns are, interestingly enough, the only ones who get to use it for free. Can't really negotiate using that for free, but it only costs $20 a month. So you have to factor what that convenience might be for you and your schedule.
Now, we do have a range of added benefits that aren't part of the regular medical vision, all that stuff. None of that's really negotiable as far as could we make it more or less. We have a gym membership. We'll refund you 50% of the cost of that over the year, and you just submit receipts and show that it was for you, and we'll pay you back. But those kind of things are sort of set for everyone, and you'll find companies are very reluctant to change those kind of things, because if they change it for one, then someone else can ask later on. So no one really wants to go anywhere near making exceptions on those kind of benefits. But that might be something where you're going from one job to the next that you want to look at. One company might have great benefits, one company might not, but really what's going to hit your pocket is what's that amount you're putting in your paycheck every month to get those benefits. So you might go somewhere for a job, they might give you an offer, and you can say, hey, look, that's great, you're paying me a little bit more, but actually I'm going to be paying more for those benefits too. So that could be one of your little things in your pocket to maybe get a couple extra $100 a year, who knows? So keep an eye on those types of things, because they can sneak up on you. There's a big difference between the base salary and your total compensation, what you can expect and what the potential is. So a lot of companies, if they're not 100% honest, will tell you what your potential compensation is, and they've got this huge bonus in there. If it's a sales role, you could get a 40% bonus, but no one ever gets it. So that's the kind of question you want to be asking when they give you this offer, and I would probably be less likely to ask the recruiter this question, and it's more likely to go to the hiring manager, because they're going to be the ones who are writing those monthly reviews for their staff and seeing exactly what those monthly bonus checks are looking like. You're going to get a better answer out of that hiring manager. But if there ever is a bonus in there that's part of your annual, quarterly, when is it paid out, those kind of things, you also want to find out not just what the potential is, but what you can expect if you hit all your targets. Can be a big difference.
How would you negotiate something like if you're already in a position and then you get your college degree, how would you negotiate a salary change?
I would go back and have that conversation when you were hired into the first position, and say, I'm currently enrolled, I'm expecting my degree. If I do that, do you have any bonus? For us, you really wouldn't be eligible for a full-time role generally unless you had that degree. But what we tend to see is either certification like a CPA or actuaries who have certain exams. And for us, we're very upfront about the increase to salary if they complete those things. But just for a bachelor's degree, it's rare.
Yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of companies don't do a great job of bringing people up when they add experience to themselves, or even just get an internal promotion. That's something that I'm very passionate about with the companies that I work at, is the philosophy of paying someone for the job they're doing rather than giving them just a mandatory 10% increase and going into this next role. So there's a lot of companies out there where, unfortunately, you're best served by leaving and taking a job somewhere else rather than staying with them and getting promotions. So that's the kind of thing that once you're in a company, you try to find out if someone moves departments and you're friends with them, to say, hey, did they give you a percentage increase, or did they pay you for the job? Like, are you happy with where they've got you at? They don't have to tell you numbers. but they can say, hey, I feel I got shortchanged, but I didn't have a choice, or they can say, hey, no, it was great. In a lot of companies, if the CFO has his way, they'll be doing the percentage increases, right? Because that's going to save the company money, and they'll get their best use out of you. Being prepared ahead of time, having that conversation, saying, yeah, I'm graduating in June, I understand this is what I'm getting paid now, can we include this in my salary, in my salary review or annual review when that comes around, that I now have my degree, can we adjust that for my market, my market value? A smart company should say yes, but they won't all say that, unfortunately.
How would you handle a situation where you have an offer already from one company and you've received yet another offer from another company, but you want to work at the first one? How would you handle that negotiation saying, I've already received a better offer, but I'd like to work for you? How would that?
So the second offer is for more money, but yeah.
I think it depends on who are the organizations similar match. Sometimes if you say, like you were talking about Exxon, right? If you're saying, well, Exxon offered me all this money, but the first organization is Greenpeace. You want to be careful how much information you're sharing, because they'd say, well, you even applied to Greenpeace or to Exxon. We don't want you now. I work with. I had a peer who was on a panel with me on Friday, and her advice was don't play, the dating game. Like, I really want to go to prom with you, but I also think that, it's fair to say, I really want to work for your company. And I have another offer that I feel more aligns with my experience. Is there an opportunity for negotiation? One of the things that's interesting about our company, we recently created 2 new entry-level roles last spring. One of them was very much based on market value. We hadn't hired people in those roles before. I had a candidate who said that to me, I want to work for you. And I said, would you mind sharing your offer with us? And it allowed us to reassess our offer, and actually we were offering a lot of positions in that same role, and we actually realigned all of them. So that one individual sharing information with us allowed us to reevaluate the marketplace.
It's one of those things. You want to try and get as much information again as you can. I was trying to think what I was trying to get at there.
I think the main thing is, you do want to be honest, but you want to advocate for yourself in that situation. But you got to play it, a little carefully. Hold your cards close to your chest until you know what maneuverability there is. I guess is what I would say.
When you're in that middle stage of interviewing for a job and the recruiter's talking to you, if they haven't asked you what else are you applying for, you might want to throw in there towards the later stages, hey, I just wanted to let you know I am interviewing for a similar role at another company, just so that they can keep their wheels turning. If you're their top candidate, you want them to come back to you quickly. You may find that even just saying, hey, I am applying for this job somewhere else. My preference is to work for you. You always want to throw that in there. But having them aware that you're interviewing as well, they won't get the sticker shock later on when you say, oh, I've already got an offer from another company that's 10,000 more than here, so what can you do? so set them up a little bit for that, and then again, come back to them, say, yes, I did receive an offer for this role. It's probably a little bit more awkward if you haven't received an offer from the company you really want to work at yet, because you might push them into saying no just because they can't work within the time frame, right? And then you've boxed yourself. So you need to keep your doors open and try and box them a little bit and say, hey, I am interviewing here. When can I expect this process to be finalised and know if I'm a candidate or not? But then if you do have 2 offers on paper, just sort of go back to them and say, hey, I have that offer, you are my preference. there is a difference. Is there any negotiation space, to even these out?
And make sure you're comparing apples to apples. So, what is the total bottom line salary and benefits?
Now, and the underlying issue here is that, in a lot of the roles, certainly your first level roles, there may not be any negotiation room really whatsoever. There is a big difference between a role that is brand new and they've never had somebody before, and someone where there was someone beforehand. If there is an existing role, and you should be asking these kind of questions during the interviews, there are two kind of ways that companies work. Some companies may only work off the budget of the salary that was in the role beforehand. So the guy who's just left was earning $48,000 a year. That's their maximum. They can't go beyond that. Other companies will be like, hey, this is the midpoint for that job. So there's a salary range, and the midpoint's 45, and that's it. So, you can ask those kind of questions when you get to, offer stage. Some companies will tell you what the range is for your grade of job. Some companies won't.
And if they tell you no, that highest level, don't go in expecting that you can negotiate to that highest level, because if they offer you that, there's not a lot of movement to move up. So you come in max point, and then as Andy said, you're either applying within for another job, or you're leaving to get additional money because you've already maxed out.
Yeah, we won't hire someone above the midpoint for the role. Someone might get 1,000 or 2,000 over the midpoint on the odd occasion, but it's very rare.
What would be some things to think about for negotiating if you're looking at a job in a different country?
Obviously the cost of living is the biggest thing, and your relocation is the second part. Primarily, you've got a lot of cultural challenges as well at that point. So you're going to leave the US where everything revolves around employers providing health benefits here. Most other countries, it's either covered by your government or you're expected by your own. It's not always that same system. So there's some pretty big things straight away if you're looking to move outside the US. That then shadows over the same kind of thing I was talking about before. Is it a US company, or is it, and the job's just overseas, or is it an actual international company that you're applying for? There are two really big differences on what kind of offer you're going to get. Are they going to pay you in the currency of that country that you're going to, or are they going to pay you in US dollars? I've seen it go both ways, especially in financial banking industries. I've got a mate who works in Toronto and he's paid in Australian dollars in Australia. I don't know how it works, but he has to move all his money across to Canada every other 2 weeks. So, as far as the negotiation goes, clearly you can't come out of pocket on that relocation. That's going to be a big money mover. You're probably looking at several $1,000s just to get it and your general stuff across. It takes time to move that stuff as well. So you could be looking at the types of negotiation is they might give you X amount of dollars, but you look into it and it takes you 3 months to ship a container over there. So there's a lot of other things other than necessarily just dollar signs, the amount of time they need to allow you to relocate. Certainly coming back to the look-see trip and finding a place to stay when you're there. They might allow you to rent furniture for the apartment and they'll pick up the cost of that. So
sometimes they provide your housing. I think that too is very regional. I've done a lot of work with the Middle East where oftentimes your housing is provided for you. It also, as Andy mentioned, are you working for a U.S. company overseas? Very different perspective.
Yeah. So try and figure out what that culture is of the company you're joining. When I was at Adidas, there's a very strong German culture there, and that home culture will filter down through management style and everything else, but it'll also filter down into the way their compensation is structured, the way they negotiate, everything. Japanese companies are incredibly different about how they would expect you to countries, and the companies are from those countries where bartering is a much more normal thing, I mean, you're in a different ballpark right there. So
One of the other things to be aware of is are you in a country that speaks a language different than English? And I had a friend who negotiated for a translator initially and then language lessons because didn't need that in the work environment, but needed that to go outside.
is there a second part there?
I suppose that covered it. More specifically, I guess not as specifically, but in addition to, could you negotiate like trips to visit
Back to the country? I kind of did that. My work's not paying for it, but they're allowing me an extra, they're being flexible on the amount of time I take off to go back to Australia. But it comes under the understanding I'm not going to do that every year. So I would certainly have that in there. I would say that international companies that are out there are probably well versed in this already. They know that people need to go home and see their families, otherwise they're going to lose you. So they don't want to lose you as an employee either. So again, just being confident, frank about discussions of what you need to feel comfortable in taking a role in a different country. It might be, hey, most countries outside the US offer more vacation anyway, usually 4 weeks or more. But one of those questions you might ask is, hey, I understand I get 4 weeks a year, but am I able to ever take that at one time? Is that something that's unexpected? Can I take 3 weeks? Is that okay with the company? Making sure you understand also that you can use what they're giving you in the way you want to.
You mentioned that you can't really just say that you want more money when negotiating a salary. So what are things that you would like to hear when people are negotiating a salary since we can't really prove our competence or in that specific position?
There's a lot of ways to prove your competence. It depends on what is the position asking for, what's your prior experience, what do you bring? Same thing, they've offered you the job, so clearly they saw something in you that stood out above the other candidates. How do you leverage that? Do you even know what that is? In your conversation with the hiring manager, if they say, I really like this about you, you can have that, say, I remember you said that I have this skill set, maybe other candidates didn't. I thought that the salary might be more in line with my experience around X. Or, if you speak a second language, and that's a requirement, that's another way, a skill set that you have that maybe not every candidate has. But you have to have something usually to leverage, and it doesn't always have to be prior experience. If you did, if it's a very statistically oriented position and you've done a lot of statistical analysis, you can use that.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're the right personality fit for the role, you may have less negotiation than if you had gone out during your degree and been able to get some work experience that was similar or could add to that role. So being able to talk about what your value is, you've got to find a way to trump up what you bring to that somehow. There's always a way. I've seen amazing things like my dad was in this industry, so I already have an understanding of that. But what recruiters or hiring managers don't want to see is you sort of get an offer, they know you're green, and you just sort of come back saying, we've seen some funny ones, like the offer was 40 and they're like, oh, I wanted like 65. That's not even a negotiation, that's like, I'm out of here. So again, it's not just coming back and asking for more money, but what's a reasonable amount to come back with and ask for? Is there much point for asking an extra $1,000? Probably not. But figure out in your head or talk to people, find out what that dollar amount you're looking for is. Is it a reasonable jump? Or is it something that they're going to come back and say, look, we can't get anything.
And sometimes you should be asking for more than you actually want sometimes too. understand what the value is, because if it is a negotiation, they may say, okay, we've got some wiggle room you want for the ability to give you two.
If it's a sales role, they're probably expecting you to negotiate too, because that's part of the job. If you don't negotiate on a sales job, you know, you kind of miss the ball there. So if it's a sales role, again, that's part of the characteristic of the job that you're going for. You could almost argue a little bit for marketing too, but you know, get in there, say, hey, it's great that I got the offer for 45. I was looking for something more like 50 for these reasons, and then they might come back and meet you in the middle. So that's a good point. Is maybe shoot a little bit above what you're really comfortable with. But again, I'd like to figure out exactly what you think those reasonable amounts are before you go shooting other ones. Good question.
Are you allowed to bring up like different perks that competitors might be offering, like if the like
yeah, you can. The trick might be if you don't have an offer on the table from that competitor, then they might say, well, that's good. Go join them, job kid. You can, but it's much better if that's your current employer that you do have an offer from. Yeah. The only way you're going to really have any leg to stand on at that point is once you're already in the job, and by then you've already given up a lot of ground. So probably not, to be honest answer.
I would tend to agree.
I would have time for one more question.
Are there any questions that you would suggest not asking on the topics to avoid during the interview process?
Don't ask someone how much they make.
Any don'ts in general?
I'll try and keep it negotiation specific, rather than going all in and interview questions. There's always don'ts. There's always don'ts. I would keep your questions focused on a positive aspect rather than negative things. So, and the same thing goes for your answers as well. If someone asks you a question about, you know, why you left your previous company and everything else, try and keep things on the positive side. And so, you know, it's a little bit more tricky to phrase with a question, but you don't want to go in and say, you know, why did you only offer me 40,000, right? Because that's a negative. And they might just think that you're spoiled and you have no understanding of what's reasonable in that industry. So you want to come in from the more positive side and say, hey, I can see this. My understanding of the industry might be that it was a little bit more around this, but then I would always just go back to why you're expecting it more. That's it.
And your excitement about working for that company. I'm really excited to come to work for you. Here are some questions or concerns I have.
Student debt's the easy one for you guys, right? I've got student loans. Always gets
That's another thing. Ask the company if they have a deferment program. A lot of companies do. Ask them through the interview stage what are their benefits for continuing education. So if that's something that you want to pursue in the future, do they reimburse for that? How do they support and mentor your growth?
Well, please join me in thanking